So far in this series, we've been looking at this thing we call the higher law, an eternal and binding standard of moral right and wrong, by which we can judge human law and to which human law should conform. We have seen how it has guided God's people from the Hebrew midwives in Egypt to the apostles in Jerusalem, William Blackstone, and Martin Luther King Jr. And we have seen how a belief in the higher law shaped America's founding and our legal system. In the remaining sessions, we will consider how the higher law matters today. We will see how it matters to religious freedom, parental rights, and the rule of law. Now we will discuss how it matters to human rights. To begin discussing human rights, let's start with a story. In late 1945, Hermann Goering was led into a courtroom in Nuremberg, Germany. Goering had been a key leader in the Nazi Third Reich. He was the commander of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. He also created the Gestapo, Adolf Hitler's ruthless political police force. He sent orders regarding the final solution, the mass murder of Europe's Jewish population. He was viewed by all as the heir apparent to Hitler. Goering was one of 22 high-ranking Nazi leaders to be criminally charged for their part in the Holocaust, which murdered 6 million Jews and nearly that many non-Jews. The charges against the defendants included crimes against peace, war crimes, and for the first time in history, crimes against humanity. Over months of testimony, the defendants often claimed they were just following orders, or nothing they had done was against the criminal law of the time. They embraced a view that we know as legal positivism. Positivism is a direct rejection of the higher law. According to this view, law is nothing more than a set of commands from the government requiring some things or forbidding others. Whether the law is valid has nothing to do with whether it is just or morally right. It is law because it is. Might makes right. The Nuremberg Tribunal, a special criminal court set up by the Allied powers, stood against this view. There is moral right and wrong. There is just and unjust. In a resounding rejection of the just following orders defense, 19 of the Nuremberg defendants were convicted. 12, including Goering, were sentenced to death, though Goering committed suicide the night before his sentence was to be carried out. It wasn't just at Nuremberg that the post-war world cried out for justice and reaffirmed the higher law's view that there is right and wrong, just and unjust. The same motivation led to the start of the modern human rights movement. After the devastation and genocide of World War II, the world's collective cry was, never again. Just months after the war had ended, the nations of the world agreed to the Charter of the United Nations, which declared, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small. The dignity and equality of all people, which we have seen are rooted in the higher law view that we are made in the very image of God, became the rallying principles around which the human rights movement was built." One of the first and most important acts of the United Nations was to approve a document known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration insists that all humans, regardless of race, sex, national origin, wealth, influence, or power, have fundamental rights that must be affirmed and secured. The Declaration's first article grounds these rights in the dignity of each person. Quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights." The Declaration then describes these fundamental rights, the rights to life, to freedom of speech and religion, to not be enslaved, to be free from arbitrary arrest, and many more. There was much to admire in the human rights movement's start. Not only did it stand for the dignity and equality of all, but it stood for the poor and powerless against powerful governments and individuals. In doing so, it acted in accord with commands from the Bible like these. From Proverbs 31, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. And this from Isaiah 1. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. The human rights movement has done some real good. Every year, the U.S. State Department prepares a report evaluating how every nation in the world protects human rights. Human rights violations are tracked and discussed. The United States and other Western governments often insist that nations follow certain human rights standards before they give international aid. Nations have changed their laws in response to the human rights movement. Many now have strong prohibitions against human trafficking. In Europe, all individuals have a right to petition the European Court of Human Rights to seek relief for human rights violations. While that court's track record has been mixed, individuals have greater religious freedom in Europe than they otherwise would as a result of rulings from that court. Now, you can probably hear in my voice that a but is coming. And you're right. As much as we should celebrate the good the human rights movement has done, we should also be concerned by the direction that it's taken. Unfortunately, much of the movement has rejected any view that human rights, or even human dignity itself, is found in God or a higher law. There were early warning signs of this. While there were certainly those among the movement's founders who explicitly rooted human dignity and rights in our creation in God's image, that was not an agreed upon view. One of the Christian proponents of human rights raised the alarm early along. Charles Malik was Lebanon's foreign minister and ambassador to the United States. He also played a key role at the United Nations, serving as president of the General Assembly and chairman of the Commission on Human Rights. He was one of the lead drafters of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and he was a strong Christian. When Malik presented the Declaration to the UN General Assembly, he warned that understanding the basis of human rights was critical. He said this, "Where do they come from? Are they conferred upon me by some external, visible power such as the state or the United Nations, so that what is now granted me may someday be conceivably withdrawn from me? Or do they belong to my essence, so that if they are violated in any way, I cease to be a human being at all? If they did belong to my essence, should they not also be grounded in a supreme being who, by being the Lord of history, could guarantee their meaning and stability? The most important issue in the order of truth today is what constitutes the proper worth and dignity of man." Now, despite Malik's warning, there was no agreement on the proper basis for rights. And there's no agreement today. And that matters a lot. Not agreeing on the basis for rights makes it very difficult to know what is a human right, or even if we can agree on that, what that right means. This problem became very real to me one summer in Strasbourg, France. Strasbourg is the home of the European Court of Human Rights, and at the time, Regent Law School had a summer abroad program there. Every year we took the students to see the court, and a judge or lawyer from the court would come and talk to us about recent cases. This particular year, a lawyer told us about a case in which the court had just decided that the right to life in the European Convention on Human Rights does not include the right to die. In other words, the right to end one's life by assisted suicide. That sounded like the right result. But then the lawyer said, "That's what the court decided now. But 10 years from now, who knows?" Wait, what? If the court is ruling on the meaning of universal, fundamental human rights that are true for all people at all times, why might the outcome of this case change in 10 years? Unfortunately, I found in studying European Court of Human Rights cases since then that the court's view of human rights is very fluid. How to interpret a particular right is certainly not rooted in a higher law. Instead, it very much depends, and the court states this explicitly, on cultural consensus and trends. Let me give you 2 examples to show why this matters so much. The first example is the one that the Strasbourg lawyer warned us about, the right to die. Currently, about 10 U.S. states, plus the District of Columbia, as well as Canada and several European nations, now have laws protecting what they insist is a fundamental human right, the right to seek medical help to commit suicide. As these states describe it, they are protecting the right to, quote, die with dignity. Now listen to that language, die with dignity. I mean, rooting a right in dignity sounds great. To have dignity means to be worthy of honor and respect. After all, the higher law tells us that every human is worthy of honor, respect, and equality because they're made in the very image of God. Indeed, this belief in the inherent dignity of all human beings was at the heart of the early human rights movement. Remember the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. But that higher law view of dignity is not the one that death with dignity proponents have in mind. For them, dignity is not innate. Dignity is not something all humans have, or something they have equally. It is something that may be gained, achieved, and preserved. As Pepperdine professor Ron Highfield explains this view, quote, the more self-sufficient and self-defining we are, the more dignity we have. Dignity can also be lost, and this is the great fear of those behind the right to assisted suicide. The fear is of a death that because of pain or disability or the loss of independence or autonomy lacks dignity. So why should we care? Because this false view of dignity actually undermines real human rights. When we equate dignity with capacity, achievement, and autonomy, we necessarily devalue the lives of those who don't have those things, or don't have enough of them. Inevitably, we look at those with disabilities and discount their worth. We make them vulnerable to abuse and discrimination. And sadly, in places that have embraced assisted suicide, we have endangered the right to life itself as vulnerable individuals are pressured to take their lives, or at times have had their lives taken without consent. Let me give you one other example of why it matters if there is a higher law basis for human rights. This has to do with religious freedom. The nations of the world have agreed that freedom of religion is a fundamental human right. The problem is there is no agreement about what freedom of religion means. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states this: everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes the freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. That sounds pretty broad and pretty clear. But many nations and a key human rights enforcement body, the United Nations Human Rights Council, have insisted that to protect religious freedom, we need to outlaw religious speech that might be viewed as critical of other faiths, particularly speech that is critical of Islam, Muhammad, or Muslims. They claim that banning what they call defamation of religion protects religious freedom. But of course it doesn't. Instead, these bans restrict speech and religious freedom. They are used to stop Christian missionaries from urging Muslims to embrace Christianity, or individuals from sharing their testimony of why they believe as they do. This is the problem with human rights that have no grounding in the higher law. We don't know what should be protected as a right, or even what basic rights mean. There is only one way to truly protect human dignity and rights: to root them in the higher law. We all have an inherent right to life. We all are made to worship God freely and to be able to freely talk with others about our faith. Charles Malik was right. For human rights to be more than a passing fad, we have to root them in something real, the higher law of the God who gave them to us.